What is up? Let's see here. Whoop, there we go. Testing. There we go. What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Insomniacs Livestream here with your host, Dr. Andrew Kim, MD. I'm a board certified psychiatrist. Thank you for joining. We do these live streams on my YouTube channel every Tuesday and Saturday night at 10:30 p.m. Central, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for joining for tonight's episode, where we'll be talking about two different topics. The first half, we are going to be talking about something called Morgellons disease. So for those of you who are not familiar, stay tuned. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes and kind of walk you through kind of the evolution of how this has become something that's talked about, amongst patients, amongst healthcare, clinicians in the media, and some of the controversies about it. And then in the back half, probably just for the minority of the episode, a little bit of consumer psychology with the growing popularity, but still, I would say, in the minority of consumers who are accepting it, the business psychology of lab grown diamonds. I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts as the listeners. If you are someone who is open to the idea of purchasing a lab grown diamond for your own personal jewelry, for an engagement ring, etc., would you be accepting of it if you were the recipient of it? Versus natural diamonds, which I think most of our society is more accustomed to as the traditional form of jewelry for engagement rings, etc. So let's dive into it today, guys. So for those of you who are joining, who are regular subscribers, welcome back. For those of you who are new to my channel, please like, please subscribe. So first of all, let's talk about Morgellons disease. So Morgellon, Morgellons disease. And so first of all, what is Morgellons disease? So Morgellons right now, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this for people who are part of the Morgellons Research Foundation, but I don't care. I speak my mind, and I've already gotten tons of hate mail from lots of different networks and advocacy groups and clinicians out there who don't like me, but whatever. That's why I have a platform and I could speak my mind. That's the beauty of America. So Morgellons disease is known to be and accepted to be a form of a delusional disorder, delusional parasitosis, and a subtype of this. So this is the fixed false belief that recurring skin lesions also have fibrous filament-like material coming out from underneath your skin with unclear etiology. Over the years, even those who are within the kind of Morgellons, I guess, research world have gone back and forth. At sometimes they say these are from non-living microscopic findings with just filament-like material that are coming out. Then a small group of researchers have said that this is your body's reaction to fight off essentially something akin to Lyme's disease, which is your body's kind of immune reaction and having these fibrous keratin collagen-like materials coming out of your skin. So Dennis says, I'm all for showcasing human achievement with synthetic diamonds and sapphires. Welcome back, Dennis. So let's talk about this a little bit. So kind of what is at least the modern history of Morgellons? And so basically, back around in 2001, again, the modern day, I'm not going to give you a history lesson all the way to the 1600s from Sir Thomas Browne, but biologist by the name of, I could be mispronouncing the name, Mary Leitao, Leitao, could be mispronouncing that, noticed non-healing lesions, skin lesions that had embedded filaments in her son, leading to her to research the medical literature to find things that were similar to this, didn't really accept the dermatologist diagnosis, and then eventually coined the term a year later as Morgellons disease in 2002, drawing inspiration from an English physician, Sir Thomas Browne, who described a skin disease in French children with harsh black hairs that were coming out of the backs of these kids. In 2006, the Morgellons Research Foundation, the MRF, was founded by Mary Leitao and other folks, and they successfully lobbied the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, to investigate this condition. And not to their pleasure, the results of that CDC study were released in 2012 that indicated that no disease organisms could be identified, even from the 115 participants who were examined, and that most of the fibers that were found were likely from cotton and other types of typical clothing fibers, essentially. There were some criticisms about that 2012 publication that came from the CDC. A lot of people said, look, there was a lot of dropouts in the study, wasn't a large enough of a study, etc. But another similar European study came to basically the same conclusion, that there is no evidence of these claims that there are these, fibrous-like growths just naturally occurring from underneath the skin, that these are somehow immune reactions to something. So both the CDC and major European medical societies concluded that we can't conclude that there is such a thing called Morgellons disease. And right now, still to this day, the accepted conceptualization of this is that this is a form of a delusional disorder, which we've talked about in a previous episode, or a subtype of delusional disorder called delusional parasitosis, the false fixed belief that one has some kind of parasitic infestation, things that are kind of under your skin, things that are growing out from underneath your skin. Just gelling on a Saturday night. KG in the house. KG always here with the with the sharp-witted one-liners. Yes, we are gelling with Morgellons, basically. So let's show you, though. And again, I know that there are those who are watching, and especially certain experts out there who are going to vehemently disagree with me. But I do believe, and I am in the camp of folks who believes that Morgellons is a delusional disorder or a subtype of delusional parasitosis until proven otherwise. Okay, and I'm just going to say it because even when you go online, go right now, go type Morgellons disease. Okay, go type Morgellons disease right now as we're talking on Google. You're going to find all these articles from well-known medical entities, the CDC, the Mayo Clinic, Mass General Hospital, all these different places, right? And they're being very gentle in their wordings, right? And you'll even see, right, the caveats. They're like, it's best to probably phrase this as Morgellons disease to not cause as much stigma, to not, have patients not seek medical help. So even the term disease is a very generous phrasing of this, okay? But you can read between the lines of what all these professional societies and medical, associations are saying, is that they do believe right now what I am saying, but they're not ballsy enough to just say it because they don't want to offend people. So, right? I mean, look, just go Google it right now. Go see what I'm saying. Okay, but let's walk through this, right? So here's an example, right, of, some of these fiber samples, filament-like things that people are saying are coming out of their skin, right? And you're going to find many images like that on Google Images, these different articles, even in PubMed. So this is kind of the samples and things that people are bringing to their dermatologists, to their infectious disease doctors. Okay. Just so that you could see it for yourself. This is just a brief summary. You can go look it up. They have the full PDF if you guys want to go read it online. I should have put the link. I could update the information portion of this video later. Basically, the CDC study involved 115 people who said they had a diagnosis of Morgellons, which is self-diagnosed or diagnosed by people who say they're experts in Morgellons. And basically, again, as I summarized, they found that These were essentially consistent with those who had delusional disorder, delusional parasitosis, right? Same thing, 2012 European study, similar conclusion, right? If you actually read the study, these are some excerpts from there, right? Materials that were found in the samples largely composed of protein, likely superficial skin. So, skin itself were in a lot of the samples, cellulose consistent with cotton fibers, some evidence of dyes, color dyes. Interestingly, here, so nylon, again, clothing material, consistent with nail polish from scratching themselves, so scratching the lesions. And that was another commentary in the study that a lot of these lesions were felt to be lesions that were caused by compulsive scratching and excoriation, leading to secondary infection. And again, a lot of the fibers that were found were typically common fibers found in clothing that were likely embedded from the scratching itself or just the clothing or clothing materials, maybe just environmental exposure, etc. So right here, I'm just, again, not my opinion, I'm just telling you the findings of the research that was spurred on by the Morgellons Research Foundation itself. Here were some demographic findings. Nearly 60% of case patients had evidence of some cognitive impairment that could not be explained by deficits in IQ. My one commentary on that, it's possible, again, this is just hypotheses and extrapolation, if some of them did have delusional disorder or some form of psychosis. We do know that one of the linchpin findings in chronic psychosis are cognitive issues that don't necessarily have to be tied to IQ itself. So that's an interesting finding. But again, that's just a commentary. I mean, I don't know enough about the demographics of each individual. Additionally, 63% of cases had clinically significant somatic complaints. Nearly a third had somatic complaint scores that were elevated to levels rarely documented among other clinical populations, but when present have been associated with chronic multi-system complaints and incapacitating fatigue. Okay. So, again, I know that there are going to be folks watching out there who might stumble across this and say, I'm an idiot. And they'll say, what about Dr. Stricker? What about Dr. Stricker's nurse practitioner, Ms. Savely? What about Maveline? I can't even pronounce their name, but a veterinary researcher. These are a core group of people in the modern era who are considered to be the inner circle and sanctum of Morgellons experts. If you go on social media, go on Google, go on YouTube, go on whatever, you'll find these NBC News fluff pieces. I'm going to call them fluff pieces. You're going to find these ABC Nightly News fluff pieces, and it seems so legit because they're interviewing these people. And that was their 15, 20 minutes of fame, right? Like if you're on NBC and NBC Healthline is doing a report on you, must be real. Must be legit. Look at these guys. They're wearing white coats. White lab coats. It's all you need these days, a white lab coat, right? So let's dig a little bit deeper into the experts, right? People are gonna quote these experts to me. I know in my email, in my comments, I'm gonna get emails, get a lot of mail. A lot of hate email, actually. It's okay. I'm confident in who I am, and apparently it's my life goal to just piss off everyone in the world, apparently. So, but let's go into it. This is an excerpt from the Carlat report, newsletter that I respect because they have a very, very anti-big pharma slant. So I want to preface it with that. So these are a group of psychiatrists who are very anti-pharma. So I feel like they have a very well-balanced approach. This is from one of their articles about this topic. So I'm gonna read the Carlat report's excerpt. So this is them, not me. The other problem is that most of the paper supporting the infectious cause of Morgellons comes from a small group of researchers, only one of whom is a physician. Some of these writers have had struggles with scientific ethics. Dr. Stricker, who is the person that I quoted being one of the key figures interviewed in these NBC fluff pieces back in the day, was accused of falsifying data by the National Institutes of Health in 1993. His paper claimed to have identified an antibody to the HIV virus that was found only in homosexual patients. It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1985, was retracted. The debacle caused Dr. Stricker to lose his post at UC San Francisco. Set loose from academia, he tried out new pursuits, including directing a penis enlargement clinic before starting a Lyme disease specialty clinic in San Francisco, and now has become the Lyme Morgellons connection expert, right? So Dr. Stricker has published many of the articles on the Lyme Morgellons connection, along with nurse practitioners he employs, starting with Ginger Savely. Miss Savely came to work with Dr. Stricker after being reprimanded by the state of Texas. So you can go look this up on the state board on Texas's website. Public data, guys. For practicing outside the standards of care in her Lyme disease specialty clinic, where she placed patients on long-term antibiotic therapy. And here's the kicker. There's always a kicker, guys, right? For a reported $500 a visit. Because when there is vague, ill-defined phenomenon, there will always be grifters and vultures. Look at this. In 2011, Kamala Harris, who is then Attorney General of California and now vice presidential candidate, this is an old article, publicly reprimanded Miss Savely for similar problems. Interesting. So how does one go from falsifying data for trying to make a name about HIV to then directing a penis enlargement clinic? This is just wild. Then I guess you become a Lyme disease expert after the penis enlargement clinic? And then you start publishing Lyme Morgellon papers. So just to show you how the Carlat report isn't using hyperbole, go online right now, all of you listeners, and go type Morgellons and see how many of the papers pop up that are by Dr. Stricker, that nurse practitioner, Miss Savely. There's another veterinary histopathologist, I believe, named Madeline something. Marianne Middleveen. Those three just churn paper after paper after paper after paper after paper in obscure journals. Obscure journals. And we've talked about this before. Just because you have a publication in a journal doesn't mean jack. I could pay money. I could literally go pay a fee and I can get into 15 journals right now if I wanted to, if I cared enough. But why would I want to publish something in a piece of crap journal? So I think the lay public doesn't understand that. They look it up on Google and it's in some digital healthcare library. They see the title of the journal that says blah, 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 study of medicine, study of pathology. They don't realize there's like 8,000 different journals out there. Probably a couple are decent. I don't even think a lot of the major ones are decent. I think even New England Journal, the JAMAs, they publish crap too. When you have the major players publishing some crap, you think quality gets better in some of the more obscure journals? Give me a break. Go Google it right now. I see several people here. Go Google Morgellons Disease journal article and see if you see those three names popping up. Dr. Stricker, Raphael Stricker, Marianne Middleveen, Savely. It's going to be the same names over and over and over again. And what they did, right, they were trying to more legitimize Morgellons, right? Because I said at some point there was an evolution, right? First they're like these, it's from a non-living source or organism. These are just fibers and filament materials that are growing. Now these folks, right, were trying to draw the connection saying this is a reaction to Lyme's disease. And this is your body's immune reactions to Lyme. So the conclusion they drew, right, and you're going to find this too, right? Again, it doesn't take much research, guys. They're going to say those who have Morgellons, which again is not a recognized disease, but they're saying those who have Morgellons, 90% of them have Lyme's. Here's the kicker though. 90% of them have Lyme's based off their made up definition, their own made up criteria for who has Lyme's. So they made up their own criteria for Lyme's disease and applied it to something that is not recognized as a disease, meaning Morgellons. So this Lyme's Morgellons connection, oh my God. Talk about a house of cards made up by a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people, churning out medical literature in dubious journals, and then getting fluff pieces by NBC and ABC. Please, guys, be educated. It's part of the reason why I do these live streams. You've heard me go on and on about some of the Amen Clinic stuff, some of that taper clinic guy who's trying to taper people for 10 grand with all his subscription supplements. This is another example. When they're suffering, sadly, some people realize that when you cling on to something and try to become a maverick. That's the thing. We should just do an episode, right, on this phenomenon of people who are praised as being mavericks. You're a maverick. You're bucking the system. That's part of the grift, right? You have become the champion of the marginalized, the downtrodden, right? You are now seen as this hero against the system. 99.9% of people don't believe this, but I believe this. I am your champion. Parentheses, and I'm also going to profit off you, and I'm also going to sell books, and I'm also going to do speaking gigs, because I've come to realize that this is the way that I make money. Simple as that. Sometimes it's not even about money. It's about notoriety, right? It's about fame. It's about being in the public eye, your 15 minutes of fame, whatever it is, but there is secondary gain. And it's pathetic. And it's pathetic. But for those of you out there, apparently I've never seen it, but have any of you guys seen it? Apparently there's like a Netflix, is there like a Netflix documentary on Morgellons? Someone was telling me that, saying they've done even like a big documentary on this. So I'm probably going to need to go watch it now that I've kind of talked about this. So I'm curious to see, is it a well-balanced documentary? Is it biased? Pete, Pete says, my parents work in the nails industry. They also wear white lab coats. Trustworthy people to care for your ... nails. I trust them with my nails. Exactly. The white. I trust them. They're probably 8,000 times more legit with their white coats than some of the folks that I referenced here. So all right. But fascinating, though. Fascinating. And, personally, before we move on to the second topic, I've probably run across, not many, probably about 1 or 2 probably about, yeah, I'd say one that was very big on this, but one that had loose beliefs in this. I'd say about one or two folks with this subtype called Morgellons. Now, in all seriousness, let's end this on a serious note before we move on to the next topic, right? I'm not poking at fun, to be clear, of people who are suffering from Morgellons, again, a subtype of delusional disorder. It's really my criticism, people who are essentially utilizing fake compassion. I'm going to say it, fake compassion, where it's really about them and furthering their careers, furthering profits, furthering attention on them, furthering their fame. And that's where it sucks. And some might say, well, some of those might really be interested. Yeah, and I want to be careful. There probably are a few folks who are genuinely interested in studying this to just learn, to say, is this something that really is some kind of true infection versus a delusional disorder? And if you want to legitimately study it, I'm not discouraging that. Unfortunately, the folks who are most famous and maybe the most notoriously known people, I don't get a sense that that's what their motives are. I get a sense that their motives are, unfortunately, more self-centered, to be blunt. And it's those folks who I have a problem with. And I just wanted to shed some light on, because I get a lot of people who say, oh, if you keep saying that this is right now known as a delusional disorder, what about all this literature? This is what they're referring to. So when you hear someone saying, look, there's so many journals, look at these experts, this is what people are referring to. This is what they are pointing at. And that's what I wanted to point out to you, my audience, because this is my platform. And I'm going to give you fair and balanced. Show me an awesome, well-done study, not by one of these biased people. Okay, then let's have a conversation. I'm going to end it with that. All right, next topic, going back to some consumer business psychology. This is more about me asking you. Okay, I don't really have an opinion on this. I just find it fascinating, right? We've talked about random kind of pop culture psychology. This is another example of pop culture psychology, is the concept of lab-grown diamonds, right? Synthetic diamonds in our society. And if there is a society where this topic is relevant, it's American society, right? So give me a break. So, right, think about it, right? I don't know how many of you here, there's several of you here right now. How many of you are married or have been married? I'm on marriage number 2, right? So I've got to go through it twice. Very expensive process in America. Doesn't have to be, right? So that's the point I'm getting to, right? Is the societal pressures and expectations, right? So, and obviously, right, in American society, by big business, we have been trained, we have been conditioned, we have been exposed by imagery over and over and over, from childhood storybooks to commercials to print medium when you're growing up in the 70s and 80s. Now it's in digital medium with social media ads and pop-up ads on X and Facebook and Instagram, right? From influencers, look at my diamond ring, right? Diamonds are associated with luxury. Diamonds are associated with commitment. Diamonds are associated with love. Diamonds have a mystique about them, right? Movies, yep, movies, Chad says. Exactly. Just we have been programmed, right? And you know my stance. Like, even with pharma companies doing direct to consumer marketing, right? Forget pharma. Now we're talking general big business. We have been conditioned and programmed. Diamonds, diamonds, diamonds. You love him, you love her, diamonds, right? Bam. just like roses. Exactly. And roses and Valentine's Day, oh my gosh, prices get jacked up, right? Anyways, so interestingly, and of course, the business psychology stats, they're all over the place, but I keep seeing lots of stats that are relatively consistent that seem to show that although the percentage of people who are open to this concept of lab grown diamonds, which are supposedly cheaper, the majority of people out there, the sentiment is still there is a preference for natural diamonds that are mined, right? The traditional way, right? So, look, I'm not an expert on the process, but my understanding is, right, basically harnessing electricity. You can grow these synthetic diamonds that essentially, from a structural chemical standpoint, are the same damn thing as a naturally mined diamond, right? And from what I've read, again, I'm just reading, I'm not an expert. Experts out there, you correct me. Sounds like at this point in the year 2025, that to make like an average grade 1 carat diamond, the cost of, again, I'm just saying the cost of the electricity and manufacturing seems to be about 200 something dollars is what I'm reading per average 1 carat diamond. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying the marketing and the shipping and all. I'm just saying apparently that's the cost of manufacturing. A couple $100 for an average grade 1 carat diamond, synthetic. Crazy, right? So knowing that that's the case, right? These are some of the commonly quoted reasons that there are maybe some psychological factors that led to that stat that I showed you, right? That I quoted you, that 80%, 80 something percent of people still would prefer receiving or giving a naturally mined diamond versus a lab grown diamond. So as I read these off, tell me if any of these resonate with you as the listeners in the audience, because I want to hear your opinion. Concerns about perceived authenticity about the lab grown diamonds, that they're less real, right? That they're less timeless, that there's less mystique about them. They're going to be viewed as quote unquote fake, right? Sentimental value. Natural diamonds are tied to all those things we've been programmed and wired by, like Chad was saying, like things in the movies, social conditioning, worries about social status. Natural diamonds have been a symbol of wealth and prestige. I think when people hear synthetic diamonds to this day, right, they have this conception of thinking of like cubic zirconium, right? But these are, again, lab grown diamonds that have the same chemical properties, look just like a real diamond. But what if your friends knew that you got a synthetic lab grown diamond and not a quote unquote real diamond? Would that concern you for your social status? Judgment from others, raise your anxiety, resale concerns. I find that weird. I'm going to be blunt. I don't think most people buy diamonds saying, God, I'm going to get some great ROI on this sucker when I sell it later. Like I always see resale concerns quoted as like a reason, but I don't know that. Does anyone out there think that? Like when you're like, I'm buying a diamond for my new fiance, or, maybe just a gift for my significant other, my spouse, like I'm thinking ROI, baby. Like what kind of ROI am I going to get on this? I don't think there is any ROI. Like you're going to lose money on these diamonds, right? I mean, anyways. So, there's concerns about eco-friendliness. Some consumers apparently question the amount of electricity because electricity requires fossil fuels, but I guess some of these synthetic diamond manufacturers are now using renewable energy to power their operations. There's also the criticism of how much damage to the environment is done with mining. I'm sure mining, I don't know much about mining, guys, but when I see like those shows on, what is it, Discovery and stuff, on like, and I know it's a different thing, but when I see like mining for gold, like I used to love those shows, Gold Rush. I used to watch that stuff. I was always fascinated. I found it funny just like watching them sift through all the dirt to see how much gold they got, right? Like, but I look at that, I'm like, damn, they really do a number on that forest or that area, right? Um, I don't know nothing about the actual impact on mining for diamonds. My knowledge of mining for diamonds comes from that Leonardo DiCaprio movie Blood Diamonds. So I'm sure that's not the most accurate depiction, but I'm guessing it's not great. I don't know how many people really think. Do people really think about like that? I mean, okay. I think people want to say that because that's a popular thing to do. Like, I worry about the environment, but I'm just curious. Have you guys here who have bought diamonds for a loved one? Some of you here had to have bought a diamond at some point. When you entered Zales or your local family owned diamond shop or somewhere in the diamond district in like a downtown area or whatever store at the mall, like, don't lie to me, guys, just for real. Maybe I'm being an a-hole, but like, did any of you say to yourself, man, one of my top questions for this salesman is going to be, was this diamond mined in an eco-friendly way? Have any of you ever said, maybe I shouldn't laugh, maybe you did, but have you legitimately said that or thought that or worried about the eco-friendliness of the diamond? I believe some people do worry about like whether work conditions of the people who've mined for these, like, was this from a company that can guarantee that this isn't some kind of, operation that basically uses slave labor or like indentured servitude? I could believe, but eco-friendly, has anyone asked that? I'm just curious, and I'm not going to judge you because I sure as hell have never said to myself, man, I hope that this diamond I'm going to buy from this jeweler was mined in an eco-friendly fashion. And fears of trends, right? That this is a passing fad. KY Kane says, I paid $500 for an 1/8 carat princess cut flawless from Walmart probably 25 years ago. Man, prices have changed, right? Prices have changed. So let's see here. Yeah, they're all blood. I'm sure. Yeah, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. But let's take a look, right? And so as these operations have streamlined, right? Again, and these are out of date. This is from like some chart from like 2021, right? So you could see here, right? Like, let's just look at 1 carat, right? A commonly bought carat size, right? Natural diamond, 1 carat, $7,000, right? This is for a round brilliant cut, right? 2,100 for a lab grown diamond, 71% price difference, right? And apparently, though, from what I'm reading, right, even as good as a deal that seems to be, that $2,100 for a lab grown diamond, again, what I'm reading now in 2025 is a lot of these streamlined operations, the actual manufacturing cost for that 1 carat is like a couple $100. So you're not even getting a deal on that. I mean, the margin on that, the markup is huge. And of course, you have to factor in labor, shipping and transport, marketing costs for whatever retailer. So I get it, but damn, that's a markup, right? If it's really like 200 something bucks or a few $100 for that 1 carat and they're going for $2,000. Yeah, KY says diamonds are a terrible investment from what I know. And yeah, I don't know that they're really an investment, right? So I think it's like, I agree with you. It's, you're purchasing and you're burning that money for a token, like a symbol of your commitment and love, right? But you can see, even though I'm saying there's probably a ripoff even with the lab grown diamonds, there is a huge substantial difference between natural versus lab grown, right? And if you could see here again, right, the one on the left is a natural round cut diamond. The one on the right is a lab created diamond. And again, there's so many varieties and the pricing's all over the map, but I'm just trying to show you two that are like apples to apples, right? Very close in clarity, grade. And there is a substantial price difference. You're talking $6,000 compared to like $1,650, right? So knowing that there's such a huge difference in price, a huge difference. And again, chemically and structurally, they are essentially diamonds. They are diamonds. They're not essentially, they are diamonds. They're diamonds. They're the same damn thing. One was just grown synthetically in a lab, and one was mined by a human in a mine. So let's bring it back to you guys. So what do you think? There's literally 9 or 10 of you here still. Let's say the occasion came up, whether it's for your loved one, some gifts, some anniversary, you're getting engaged. I want to hear it from both perspectives. You as the purchaser, are you open to buying a lab-grown diamond? If you are the receiver, would you care as a recipient that is a lab-grown diamond versus a naturally mined diamond? And how come? And I want to hear the rationale for either one. Okay? No judgment. No judgment. I just want to hear, because look, like I said, the latest business consumer surveys show that even though the popularity and acceptance of these lab-grown diamonds are increasing to the highest it's ever been, and there's more and more of these synthetic lab retailers, still 80% or more of folks would prefer buying or receiving a naturally mined diamond. Me personally, I guess I'll start it off while you guys think about that. I just want to hear your opinions, whether you're the purchaser or recipient. If I was a recipient, I don't think I'd really care. Because I mean, I guess my mindset is, I mean, who am I trying to impress really? But I guess I shouldn't say this in some stereotypical, this is a very sexist stereotypical thing. But I guess I'm in the mindset of, I'm just a dude, and I'm just like, well, I mean, what difference does it make to me? It looks shiny and sparkly. It looks like a real diamond. It is an actual diamond. It just happened to be grown in a lab. So as a recipient, I don't think I would care. Now, I'm trying to be fair now. Now, as a purchaser, I don't think I wouldn't have a problem buying it for my wife, because I know it's an actual diamond. One came from a lab in a manufacturing plant, and one came from the ground, but they're the same thing. And to be pragmatic and practical, man, if I could buy it for you for like $1,000 versus $7,000, why don't we just take the $6,000 and go on a vacation and spend the money on time together, or some experience, a luxurious experience together, or something for a goal of ours together? To me, that's more meaningful than, it's better that I got you the $7,000 diamond versus the $1,000 diamond, because this shows, because of societal acceptance, that I spent X amount more. That translates to me loving you more. If that's what my love or my commitment is predicated on, societal acceptance, man, we'd be in trouble. So, but KG brings up a very good point. Partners should agree, right? I mean, there should be a conversation, because you might think this way, I might think this way, but what if my spouse doesn't, right? So let's read through some of the comments. So you guys need to comment now, whether you're the purchaser or the recipient. How would you feel? Let's read through some of these. So let's see. KG says love and diamonds are expensive hobby. Let me give you a piece of advice, KG. Don't get married more than once. It's very expensive endeavor. You are very correct. KY Kane says, I knew a jeweler here. He'd switch you out fast. You never knew you were in. I don't even know how I would know, right? I mean, you see sometimes in these movies and TV shows, like people like looking through like a monocle thing or something, and I don't know. I mean, some of these have like serial numbers, but man, I'd be so clueless if someone switched it out. If they went for a cleaning, I would have no clue, man. I believe you. I'm sure that happens from time to time, right? KY says the fake ones look realer, and one, we aren't taking people's lives to grow. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's probably and again, I have no idea, man. Like I said, I'm not kidding. My knowledge of the diamond mining process is literally relegated to that movie Blood Diamond, which is probably not the best way. It's not the best source of getting information. I'm here criticizing people of citing, quackery, right, for Morgellons. So I also need to be fair, right? If you guys know more about the diamond mining process, right? That movie, KY, it's funny. You actually answer, says, KY says that movie is pretty accurate. So, okay. Alex says, diamonds are a girl's best friend, or are they? Ooh, okay, I'll provide. Exactly, right? KG says, is your bling real diamonds? Me, what I bought for my spot? Yeah, because you know what? I got married, man, basically at this point, it's going to be our 10-year anniversary a decade ago. And back then, lab-grown diamonds weren't really a popular thing, even as recently as 10 years ago. So I think it's really just blown up. What is it? Blown up maybe in the last 3, 4, 5 years, right? So I'm not going to lie, KG. If the lab-grown diamond industry was as prevalent as it is now, I'm not going to lie. I probably would have had a conversation back then and said, hey, would you be okay with me? I'll get you a 2-carat diamond instead of a 1-carat diamond at 1/3 the cost, right? But to your point, KG, right? I wonder what kind of conversation that would have brought up. I don't know. So to your point, so not even just the psychology of like the mindset of the buyer and the purchaser, right? It interestingly brings up the psychology of the dynamics between the two people, right? What if one says, no, lab grown? Are you kidding me? That's what you're going to do for me? Other says, what's the big deal? They're both diamonds, right? So that's another fascinating aspect. So that's that you bring a very interesting notion into this. KY says, my girl said she don't care what it is. That sounds like a very flexible person. So she said 7K or 1K. Alex says, purchase only real, receive whatever my ingredients get. KG says, am I gonna buy a diamond for the 10-year? If it's a lab grown, maybe. If it's a lab grown. Right now, I don't have the discretionary funds. And trust me, I'm not singing you a sob song about a psychiatrist or physician not making good money. So don't get me wrong. The average American makes 38 grand, 40 grand a year. I make plenty compared to that, okay? But I'm also not swimming in discretionary funds. So, trust me, there's a concept out there. They think every physician's driving a Porsche or some Cybertruck. Not I. So, what else? Let me read some other comments. Beefy Buttercup says, the dog is ugly and a dumb addition. Oh, you mean in my starting screen? Yeah, it's kind of corny. It's a cartoonish, but you know what? That dog's my dog. That's actually my dog, just animated. So if you're referring to that kind of sucks because that's my dog named Bingo. So Bingo would be offended by that comment. So, but I have no shame showing off my dog's face. So let's see what else. So let's see. What else? And let me see what other comments I missed. So if Jenny is still here, this is off topic a bit, but Jenny said, we might as well read through all the comments. Jenny says, how do you feel about Lyrica when none of the SSRIs or mood stabilizers have worked? Look, a lot of things in the field of psychiatry are done off label. I'll be blunt. I mean, Lyrica wouldn't be a first line option for me for most psychiatric issues, but I'm not saying that Lyrica couldn't help an individual. We do so many things in the field of psych that are off label. Lyrica, although it's traditionally used for pain and neuropathic pain and nerve pain, Lyrica, modulates GABA. And, I do think it's quite possible that modulating GABA or GABA can help sometimes, maybe with some degree of anxiety, can help maybe with some aspects of mood. But again, those are maybes, and those are going to be case by case. So Have I seen it done? Yes. Have I personally done it? Not really. I mean, have I had people come on that regimen off label for psychiatric purposes from other doctors? Yeah. And then have I refilled it for them? Yeah. I probably am not one to start that as one to do, one to initiate it. So that's my opinion on. But yeah, I don't think it's absurd. So it's theoretically possible because, again, things that modulate glutamate and GABA all can theoretically, sometimes help with mood and anxiety. I think it's just going to depend on the individual. So I'd probably start off with things that are more affordable because there are other GABA modulating things that are more affordable and accessible than Lyrica. But no, not absurd. Not absurd. KG says, alimony is not typically lab grown. No, it's not. Let's see. Alex says, interesting. Older has been psychiatric treatment for over 50 years on meds, bipolar 2, other doesn't like talk about it. Gotcha. Well, yeah, if you have a specific question, Alex, let me know. So, all right, guys. Well, we'll open it up to some free for all questions now. So it doesn't have to be about Morgellons, doesn't have to be about business consumer psychology, but let's open it up. Give it at least 10 minutes. We'll stop at the hour mark. But what do you guys got? What questions? Again, any question except direct medical advice. I can't do that for you. I'm not your personal physician, but free for all time for the last 10 minutes and counting. So there's still 10 of you guys here. So what questions you guys got while we just kind of shoot the breeze for a little bit? So what else has been going on? What else has been on your mind? What's been in the news that you guys want to chat about? I've just been seeing so many news about Cybertruck and Tesla vandalism, which is a fascinating topic. I guess the backlash for Elon Musk and his Doge, I guess, actions in DC. So apparently, a lot of Teslas and Cybertrucks getting destroyed and vandalized across the country. So there's been a rash of those, which has been fascinating to watch and read about in the news. What else has been going on? What else have you guys been hearing about? What other questions do you have? Pete Pete says, I might write a book about today's topics, from Morgellons to lab grown diamonds, restructuring your delusions to something shiny and real. Oh God. Pete, you could take it one step further, right? And maybe if you had you come up with another topic where diamonds are coming out of your skin. So, Chad says, what journals do you depend on for knowledge? That's a good question, Chad. I don't necessarily rely on like one specific journal because, like I said, I tend to stick to some of the more well-known medically accepted ones like New England Journal of Medicine, Journal of Psychiatry, JAMA. But even then, you have to be careful because even those publications that are, kind of accepted in the medical field, you have to really look at the source of who is the author, what are the sources of funding, because even those big journals are not immune to putting out weird stuff. So, it's, but I do stick with the more, because at the very least, right, the way that I view it is their floor or threshold for quality, is better than obscure journals, right? So, doesn't mean that they're perfect. They make a lot of, I think, some interesting choices of what they publish as well. And then again, who is bankrolling, right? Who is bankrolling the research itself, right? Is this funded by a specific advocacy group, which could be a good or a bad thing depending on who that group is. Is this being funded by big pharma, which then leads to bias? Everyone has bias, so it's not just pharma, but I mean, it's so I think it's really more about also not only what journal, but like where is this coming from and who is funding this thing, right? Research is an expensive process. Is this someone who's just trying to get famous and make a name for themselves? Are they really trying to advance science? All these different things are the minutia that matter. So I wish I could be more specific, but I stick to the bigger journals. So I think one of the criticisms of the bigger journals, right? Oftentimes they are slower to adopt novel concepts, right? So, but and I also worry that some of these bigger journals sometimes allow topics and articles that are really more about pushing certain political agendas than actual science. And I almost equate it to how like now most mainstream news outlets like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, they're no longer news outlets, right? These are basically essentially just platforms to put out certain opinions, right? And same thing, unfortunately, medical journals have no longer become immune to that, where oftentimes I feel like they're pushing out journals to push an agenda and an opinion about a specific topic in healthcare versus advancing science. So let's see. What other questions? Alex says, sorry, older friend of mine, bipolar, doesn't like it, thinks he'll be a famous musician and is major hypochondriacs, yet some real illness. He's getting help for 50 years. Well, I'm glad he's getting help. Yeah, it's tough, I have a lot of patients, who suffer from bipolar disorder, and my heart goes out to them because to this day, right, in the year 2025, we don't have a cure for bipolar disorder, right? Our treatments, our medicinal interventions can manage the disorder. I would say in about 1/3 of patients, we do a pretty decent job. I would say in 2/3 of our patients, even with medicinal intervention, it's a struggle. Stats show that 2/3 of our patients need to be on 2 or 3 medicines to just somewhat manage their symptoms. It's rough. It's rough, right? And that's a sobering concept, right? But at least I'm realistic enough to know that for most of our patients with bipolar, it's a real struggle. So yeah, I mean, no, it sounds akin to what we see in a lot of the cases of bipolar disorder, Alex. So the heart goes out to him. So yeah, Chad, yeah, money has power. So yeah, I mean, even journals are a big business, right? Even continuing medical education credits is a big business, right? You got to follow the money trail, right? KY says, how long to withdraw from Valium? Oof. I mean, that's hard to say. I wish I could be more specific, KY. It really is depending on the individual, how much Valium they're used to taking. For someone who has kind of a milder, to moderate dependence on Valium, I mean, that process could be weeks to kind of safely detox from on an outpatient basis. For someone who's got significant, dependence on it with a very high dose, I mean, that could take, to be careful and cautious. Again, if you're doing this on an outpatient basis, planned, I mean, that could take months to taper off gradually. Luckily though, Valium is one of the, I'm going to be careful. I'm not saying it's easy. Don't get me wrong, but it's easier than getting off of something that's short acting like Xanax. So general rule of thumb, and again, I'm not saying that it's easy. So people who jump on it, anytime I say that it's better, I'm not saying easy, but it's a true statement, right? There's an inverse relationship, KY. The shorter acting that a benzodiazepine is, meaning how fast it goes in and out of your body, the shorter it is, the harsher it's going to be getting off of it. So Xanax, that'll hit you so fast when you're trying to get off of that stuff. Where things that are longer lasting, longer acting, slower to leave your body will make it a little bit better relative to a shorter acting benzo, to be very clear in my statement. Okay. Lisa, hey, Lisa from the Northwest. So Lisa says, this question's a big one. If you're possibly able to answer, I'm curious why sometimes individuals who want to do self-harm want to do it in front of someone, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend. Yeah, it's a complicated answer, Lisa, but let's get into it. I could probably do a whole episode on chronic. Keywords are non-suicidal self-injury, or NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury. I used to work in what was called a self-injury partial hospital program. I know that's very niche and very specific, but yeah, one of my first jobs, part of my duties was managing and working with patients in a non-suicidal self-injury partial hospital program. Patients would come 5 days a week. I know it sounds pretty intense. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 6 hours a day to our program if their primary issue was chronic self-injury via cutting, burning, hitting themselves, punching themselves, hitting their head on a wall, scratching themselves, and maybe they weren't at the point where they needed to or would meet the criteria or needed to be locked in a psychiatric unit, but maybe needed much more than seeing their therapist once a week or once every couple weeks. And so, yeah, so I got a lot of experience there. So I think it's, and again, I hate to be vague, Lisa, but it really depends on each individual, right? Self-injury can represent so many things, and it could be very different for each individual. So when someone reports to me, when I'm doing an intake and meeting someone for the first time, and I learn from them that they have a history of non-suicidal self-injury, I think sometimes the patients get thrown off by me, right? I think there's almost and I understandably, there's a reluctance, and they say they're nervous. I could see them kind of fidgeting. I think they think the moment that they say that they're cutting themselves or they're burning themselves or hurting themselves, that I'm going to call 911 on them, right? And I try to reassure them and say, look, I'm asking you these questions and I want to really know the details because I need to understand. It gives me insight into your pain. And it helps me understand your pain and your suffering and what you're going through. It helps me understand you, honestly. That's what I'm trying to ascertain by asking you these questions, right? And what I ask them typically, and I phrase it differently for each individual, but the gist of it, Lisa, is I ask them in a very neutral fashion. I want to understand, right? It doesn't come from a point of condescension, and I don't say to them, don't you know that that's bad for you? Don't you know that's going to injure you and hurt you? Look, individuals who perform self-injury understand cognitively this is not a healthy coping strategy. So it's really not about like education, right? So I say, I know that you know it's not healthy, but I want to understand, like, what does it do for you? What does it represent to you? Because it must do something, right? And a need, some kind of need, even if it's being met maladaptively, is somehow being partially met or you're attempting to meet it by doing this. So give me insight into that phenomenon, right? And you will invariably get a lot of different answers, Lisa, right? You're going to get answers like, for me, it's a way to exert a sense of control. I feel out of control. I feel overwhelmed. I feel things are out of control, but I can control this. I can control how I injure myself, how many cuts I make, how deep I go, where I do it. I can control this. I almost find it to be grounding. I just feel like I'm not even present and I'm here almost dissociating. This makes me feel like I'm here in this moment because I can feel this. This is real. Right? For some people, this is a way to manifest their self hatred and their self punishment. For some people, this is a way to feel physical pain rather than emotional and psychological pain. They prefer this, right? For some people, it's to feel something because they feel so numb. For others, it is about attention and it's about sending a message and maybe communicating, like you're saying, Lisa, um, to their spouse, their boyfriend, their girlfriend. Hey, like, you think it's not a big deal? You think I'm not suffering? You think it's just in my head? You're telling me just get over it? Here, what do you think now? Or I'm begging you, listen to me. Not hear just the words that are coming out of my mouth, but listen to me. And maybe this is what it takes. So sometimes, right, in your specific case, Lisa, what you're asking, right, you'd have to ask that individual, you know, what were you trying to communicate to your spouse, to your friend, to your clinician, to your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife? Like, what was it you were trying to convey? What need were you trying to get met? Was it validation? Which it might be. Was it to convey the degree of suffering because maybe you feel like they don't get it? Was it just a scream, a physical way to scream, I need help and I'm so desperate. How come you're not helping me? Right. So I wish I could be super specific, Lisa, but it could be a wide variety of answers and it's going to be case by case. But it could be related to a lot of those kind of concepts that I just talked about that they're trying to communicate specifically to that person. Right. And I'm sure I missed a few things, but I'm saying those are the types of things that I try to get into and really just ascertain from each individual. Because again, to be clear, right? Do I want my patient to be hurting themselves? Of course not. But it's an opportunity to have a non-judgmental conversation to get a peek into their soul, not to sound corny, right? To understand their pain, to understand their suffering. It is an opportunity to connect with that individual, right? Rather than coming at them with judgment, right? Just like, what you've seen in my addictions video when someone's drinking, don't you know drinking's bad for you? Yeah, they know drinking's bad for them. No crap. They know that, right? So what is having that kind of attitude? What is that going to do, right? It's the same thing. Like, don't you know that's dangerous if you cut yourself, hurt yourself? Burn? Yeah, of course they know. They know. So like, tell me about it though. You know that, yet you're doing it. So, but yeah, it could be for a variety of reasons, Lisa. So it's hard to say, but it could be oftentimes that, right. I mean, I know I'm stating the obvious. It's communication, but communicating what and trying to understand that it's tough in the heat of the moment. But if they have some time, hours, a day to just let that be behind them a little bit. And when they're not in the heat of the moment, they're a bit more grounded, trying to kind of dig into that. And last thing I'll say, Lisa, is when you are having that conversation with that individual, right? I know this is subtle, but I think it's important. I actually wouldn't start with why. Like, I wouldn't use why questions if possible. And this is an exercise they teach us in dialectical behavioral therapy, because when you think about why questions, WHY, when you start with a why questions are rather abstract, right? And you're almost then assuming when you ask it, they kind of have connected all the dots, and that question in itself might actually stifle that conversation. Not always. So I don't want to make it sound like you shouldn't ever ask it. I'm just saying maybe I wouldn't start with why, right? And you typically want to ask these descriptive type of questions: how, what, when, where. Like, so what was happening just prior to you hurting yourself and doing the self-injury? What was being said between you and your spouse and your partner? Where were you? What was going on? How were you feeling? What emotions were there? What thoughts were there? What were you trying to communicate? How did it make you feel when you hurt yourself and showed your partner, right? So, because once you have gone through this exercise of thought mapping and emotion mapping by doing what, how, where, when, because sometimes describing these concrete descriptors are a little bit easier than the abstract why type of questions, then you yourself, meaning you, Lisa, or someone else who's guiding them through this, right? You can kind of see then, and you could see these different dots and maybe help them connect the dots. And that exercise itself can lead you to the why, if that makes sense. Hopefully that was helpful, but that is like a concrete exercise we used to do in that self-injury partial hospital program. So yeah, so that's tragic. Yeah, soldiers have died from suicide by doing it in front of their spouses. Oof, that's rough. That is rough, Lisa. That is rough. Yeah, I don't. It's and that's so that's yeah. So that's a different concept, right? Obviously, that's there's no coming back for them. There's no dissecting it like we just did with the concept of self-injury, non-suicidal self-injury. So in suicide, yeah, sadly, that leaves that element of lack of closure and mystery, right? And almost then tragically, right, leaves this almost huge burden to that spouse. Horrific, horrific, horrific tragedy. That spouse now has to carry with them, right? Scarred into their psyche, into their spirit, into their mind, into their soul. Yeah, I'm not even gonna try to pretend, Lisa, like I understand exactly the why, right? I mean, obviously there's lots of hypotheses. I mean, one could hypothesize, in some instances, maybe there's anger, maybe there's bitterness, maybe that's a message being sent. In some cases, you could probably hypothesize the opposite, that they wanted to at least be in the presence of a loved one or be with someone and not be alone, right? That's hard to say. That's hard to say because obviously we don't get the ability and the luxury in that kind of tragedy to break it down like we do with non-suicidal self-injury, where we can actually talk to the individual, dissect it, understand them. It's hard to say. The one comment I will make is, and I don't know, and I'm going to be careful here, Lisa. I'm not going to say that this holds true in the military demographic, but if you read a lot of, and I know it sounds morbid, right? I mean, I showed you in our last episode, guys, um the Violence Prevention Project database, right? There's a lot of people who compile a lot of data about morbid topics, right? And there are literally, speaking of journals, Chad, there's journals of suicidology, right? There are journals that are devoted to the study of suicide and suicidology. And so a lot of what happens, Lisa, a lot of the data that we have compiled, and again, a lot of these are just correlative things. It's not proof of anything. But we do believe, right, that impulsivity is such a huge component of suicide. And what I mean by that, Lisa, is that we find that when we have studied folks who have died by suicide, And when we've studied suicide attempt survivors, a very common thread, and it's, again, I can't give you exact numbers, but in suicidology literature, there is a belief that impulsivity is a huge component of suicide attempts. And what I mean by that is a very large percentage, I'd say most, even when we have evidence from suicide notes or messages left by the person who died about their plans, or those who have survived from suicide attempts who are interviewable, will say they deviated from their premeditated place, time, method, oftentimes, which demonstrates that there's impulsivity. So even for those who are considered planners, most tend to deviate in some shape or fashion from their plan. And again, I know it sounds rather morbid, but a very large percentage, more than half, easily more than half. And this is from coroner's data, have drugs in their system, meaning alcohol. I'm considering that a drug, but alcohol, other drugs, etc., meaning that is another form of impulsivity, right? When under the influence of something to reduce inhibition, to alter your impulsivity threshold, is another form of impulsivity. So there may be an element, again, I'm not saying, I didn't say always, I didn't say for 100%, but sometimes it may not even be premeditated or planned out, is what I'm pointing out, Lisa. So again, I don't think I gave you an answer, but just kind of at least giving you some more background about some of the findings we see even in suicidology, suicide research, actually, that how much impulsivity itself plays into it, where many just, even though it seems like this was planned out, most actually deviate from their plan. So some of it, there might, and I know that's a very unsatisfactory thing to swallow, but sometimes there, that might not even have been necessarily a planned thing that they were intending to do, is what I'm pointing out. Again, sometimes it may be, sometimes it may not be, but I can at least point out there is a large percentage of folks where it may have been done on impulse without much premeditated planning ahead of time, potentially. So, let's see a few more and then we'll wrap things up. So Justin says, Justin, if you're still here, there's still some more people here than before. So let's see. Justin says, do you support the use of quetiapine to help with sleep for people who go to bed anxious and can't sleep? Yeah, I prescribe it from time to time. I think we have to do it with caution. Again, as a general statement, I can't give you direct medical advice, but just as a general topic, not my favorite thing to do, but I do it. I do case by case and have a very, very transparent conversation with my patients. And I tell them when they ask me, well, why is it not your favorite thing to do? Because number one, it's not a benign thing to do. And just to be clear, Justin, right? The history of quetiapine is it's an antipsychotic. So it was originally designed to be used for schizophrenia. And when we use it in schizophrenia, average doses tend to be like 600 to 1,000 milligrams a day, which I know sounds very high, but I have patients who have chronic psychosis where their daily dose is like 800 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams a day. We also use it in bipolar disorder, oftentimes specifically for bipolar depression. And when we're using it to treat a depressive episode in the context of bipolar disorder, the goal dose, again, the average dose is about 400 milligrams a day. Now, interestingly, right, it has, just like you're saying, it has found a niche. Keywords off label. It is not FDA approved for insomnia, but we sure as hell know one of its side effects is it makes people sleepy as hell. and it sedates people. That's one of its criticisms. It's a very, very sedating medication. So off-label, meaning this is not what it's FDA approved for. We use it off-label in psychiatry sometimes for severe cases of insomnia. And when we use it for insomnia, the dose ranges are much lower. We tend to use sometimes as low as even 12.5 or 25 for some people who are very sensitive to it, sometimes up to 100, 150, 200 milligrams. So it really just depends. But I would say you're definitely in those lower ranges. I just wanted to give you context. But that's how high you could go if you were utilizing it for its originally intended purposes. Now, the caution that I'm saying of why it's not my favorite thing to do, but I still do it from time to time when we're really in a pinch and someone's insomnia is really bad, is because, look, even though side effects of quetiapine tend to be dose dependent, meaning higher the dose, the higher the risk, like many meds, there's still a risk of these things, even at low doses with chronic use. So if you're using it every night, there are a few things. Like there's a risk. I mean, number one, the elephant in the room side effect is, will you be over sedated? Because it could be quite sedating. So people feel like they're groggy in the morning, oversleeping. Even after they wake up in midday, they're still hazy and have like cognitive haziness and dulling. So that's kind of the obvious one. But separate from that, right, I would say more like the intermediate or longer term risks are going to be things like, even at low doses that are used for insomnia, with chronic use, there could be weight gain. There could be notable weight gain. There could be insulin resistance, meaning you don't respond to insulin as well as before, which then translates to higher blood sugars, diabetes risk. It can, even without you necessarily eating tons of more like fatty foods, your cholesterol levels can actually go up. So one has to understand that increasing cholesterol levels could be a risk, higher blood sugars and increasing your diabetes risk is a possible risk. Those would be relevant, like medical things that one would want to have your family doctor, family medicine doc, primary care doc, or your psychiatrist check labs on periodically, just to make sure that your blood sugars aren't creeping up, that your cholesterol levels aren't creeping up, that you're not gaining weight steadily. And then longer term, even though it's relatively a lower risk with quetiapine compared to even other antipsychotics, I would say head to head, quetiapine is one of the safer ones in respects to the next side effect I'm going to list. But there is a neurological or neuromuscular phenomenon called tardive dyskinesia. Oh, look, Alex even wrote about it just now. So tardive dyskinesia or dyskinesia, yeah. And that is basically involuntary muscular movements, often these like muscular jerks or like tick-like movements that can develop with exposure to antipsychotic medication. The pre-1990s antipsychotics, with the exception of risperidone, but most of the pre-1990s medications head-to-head have a higher risk than some of the post-1990s antipsychotics. So quetiapine happens to be one of the lower risk ones head-to-head, relatively speaking, compared to things like Haldol and some of the older antipsychotics. But there's still a risk, and again, it's these stats are not always accurate, but I would say, with the old school antipsychotics, the risks were a cumulative risk of increasing the risk by 1 to 2% per year of exposure with the old school antipsychotics, and they say with the newer ones, it's more like a 0.5% per year exposure risk cumulatively per year of exposure of developing tardive dyskinesia. So in general, if you are taking antipsychotics regularly, even at a low dose, Justin, for insomnia, your physician, hopefully, or your prescriber should be periodically checking. Sometimes they might be doing it without necessarily, saying explicitly to you, this is what we're testing for, but probably a good idea to do some. It's called the AIMS exam, AIMS, Abnormal Involuntary Movement Scale exam, and you just go through a series of things where They'll ask you to like tap your finger repeatedly like this, like this, like this. They'll make you do alternating movements. So they'll walk you through a series of exercises basically. And you should be doing this periodically. And what you're doing for is while you're focusing on these like intricate movements, it's distracting your mind. And you're focused on this and it relaxes your other muscles and it makes it a little bit easier for a clinician to detect little involuntary subtle jerks of the corner of your mouth going up, your nose kind of going up, your eyes excessively blinking, your tongue moving. They'll have you do other movements like sitting like on a chair. Sometimes they'll say no arms on the chair. I actually don't think it's a bad thing when there's arms on the chair where you could at least rest like your elbow on the hinge like this, because by relaxing your hands like this, sometimes even as we're just talking back and forth, and again, we're distracted by our conversation back and forth, you might be able to then detect these like subtle movements like this in the hands and the fingers. And those would be signs that one might be developing some indications of tardive dyskinesia. These again, you're not doing it consciously. They're just involuntary muscular movements. If you can catch this early enough, Justin, and you lower the dose or stop that med, it can be reversible. And these will go away. If you ignore this, and you don't catch it soon enough, and you just keep proceeding with the offending agent, meaning the antipsychotic that's causing it, and you don't catch it soon enough, sadly and tragically, in those cases, those movements can still persist and become irreversible. So that's why it's important to keep up with those things. So, Justin says, yeah, load. So yeah, I understand. And yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying that it's like an unsafe thing to do. It's just everything we do in life has risks. And it sounds like, so you're experiencing some side effects too. Yeah. So as long as you just kind of know what you're getting yourself into, and sometimes I hear you, man. I hear you, man. There's no judgment here. It's sometimes it's kind of like a deal with the devil, right? I mean, you're saying because of consequences of alcohol, need something to help with, because yeah, I know how it's the insomnia could get so bad, right? And not sleeping, there's a trade-off for that, right? Not sleeping pours gasoline on the fire, basically. No sleep doesn't help a goddamn thing, right? So I hear you, man. I mean, sometimes it's just like bad choice A versus bad choice B. So as long as you're just kind of aware of this kind of stuff, and as long as you and whoever's prescribing it are just kind of monitoring these things, like the tics that you mentioned, just, you just have an open conversation. You got to do a risk benefit ratio analysis, and you got to do what you got to do, man. This is about survival, giving you the best quality of life as possible. Hopefully, look, in an ideal world, like whoever's listening to this, I know they're going to say I sound like a moron, but you know what, man? Sometimes it's about survival, and you got to do what you got to do, right? And hopefully in an ideal world one day, Justin, right? I'm hoping you don't need to use that and you can sleep on your own accord without the use of that stuff. But for now, if that's what's going to help you as a tool, no judgment here, brother. Okay. Bottom line, I just hope that you're trying to be healthy. You're trying to stay motivated, take a day at a time. So that's the more important thing, that you're motivated and you're getting help, Justin, right? So, but yeah, you just keep an open dialogue with your prescriber, right? And that's what it's about, man. That's what it's about. So I appreciate you, man. And thanks you. No. No problem on the advice. The least I could do is to give you general education, general advice. Like I said, no nonsense from me, right? I'm just going to tell you how it is. Not going to hold back punches. Just going to tell you what the side effects are. Just, it's more about you being educated so you can advocate yourself. There's too many idiots out there, Justin, right? Some people are going to say, psych meds are the devil. Don't ever take them. They're poison. And other people are going to be like, oh yeah, no problem. These meds are all safe. No, it's the truth's in the middle, Justin, right? Sometimes you're making a handshake with the devil to trade off one thing for another. That's the point of my channel. It's just like, I just want you guys to be educated. I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm not the gospel. You guys got to make a decision for yourself, but I'm just hoping I can give you balanced information on my channel. That's what this is about here. So I appreciate you, man. So you keep looking out for yourself. You keep staying motivated, Justin. So, all right, let me scan one last time and then we'll wrap it up. I went way past the hour mark, guys. I appreciate you guys though. When we have interesting stuff to talk about, I lose track of time. Let's see. What else is there? Alex says the late Judy Garland did suicidal stuff and self-injury in front of people. This was in the 50s and 60s. Oof. I'll have to read about that, Alex. So if you're still here, obviously I've only heard some tidbits about some of the stuff that Judy Garland went through, but I'll have to read a little bit more on that. So Chad says, Haldol friend got that from Haldol. Yeah, no. I mean, so part of the abnormal involuntary movement scale is also like showing your tongue, lifting it up, doing other movements while doing, sticking out your tongue. So you can even see abnormal tongue movements. It'll look like someone's like moving their tongue a lot, darting in and out. So, yeah, I mean, tardive dyskinesia sucks. In recent past, they've come out with a couple treatments though, that supposedly can help to some degree. I don't know how affordable they are because they're still branded, but we could talk about that one day as well. So, KG said, Dr. Kim, you're a diamond in the talking about diamonds today. Diamond in the rough. I appreciate that, man. That's kind of you, man. You're a diamond in the rough as well, man. You are the king of one-liners here, so I appreciate you. I appreciate you. You've come to so many of my live streams. I appreciate that. So, okay, guys. Well, it's midnight here in Chicagoland, or the Chicago suburbs, I should say. So I hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for joining. I know we had a wide variety of topics. We talked about Morgellons, the diamond industry and psychology there, and a lot about self-injury, a little bit about Seroquel. Wide variety of things, man. That's why mental health and psychology is such a fascinating topic. I hope you guys, just like Justin, I hope you guys are... KG, you're killing me, man. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. Thank you again. And we'll 6 p.m. in New Zealand. Oh man, that's so fascinating. I get a bunch of New Zealand and Australian viewers sometimes. So 6 p.m. in New Zealand. So, man, appreciate you watching in from New Zealand. You know what, Justin? I'm not joking you. My wife, my kid, and I, and my sister-in-law, I have never been to New Zealand, but our plans are we're going to be going to New Zealand in December. I know nothing about New Zealand, but on one of my future live streams, you need to come here and you need to give me a few places that I have to go, and with certain areas that I have to go in New Zealand. Okay, so I'm going to need some native New Zealander local tips. And I know that's a broad thing because I know it's such a huge place, but once I know what area I'm going, I'm gonna need you to give me a few tips of where to go because I know nothing about New Zealand, but we're gonna be going there in December. So I'm looking forward to it. I haven't been out of the country in a while. So, all right, guys, you guys have a good night. And be safe, everyone. And we'll talk on Tuesday at 10:30 Central in American time, 10:30 Central. So, all right, guys, you guys have a good one. Fun talking to you guys as always. Have a good night, everybody. Be safe.